What made you want to be a stand-up comedian? What was the first time stepping on stage like for you?
I didn't know exactly what to feel because I didn't expect it to go that well. I always say to new comedians, just go on stage, just try as much as you can, and if something doesn't work for the first time or the second time, just keep trying.
What do you do comedy for?
Seeing people smile or seeing people come up, I just want to try to help people in a way that I know I can do it, and if people like what I do, that's great.
Hello, you beautiful people. I'm here to make some quick announcements. I'm actively looking for guests to come on this show. So your stereotypical creatives like singers and dancers and musicians and artists, but I'm also looking for your non-stereotypical creatives. People like carpenters and accountants and teachers and scientists. I believe that creativity is a mindset and not something that you do. I am also super proud to present our guest for today. Stia is a wonderful human being, and I'm so excited for them to share their story with you. Cheers. So Stia, welcome to the show. It's an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much for having me.
What made you want to be a stand-up comedian?
I always enjoy stand-up. Some people would dare to say that I'm a nerd for comedy, so I always watch a lot of comedy, and with the time going by, I had friends push me over to try, because I always went to see shows alone, and I always make jokes to like my close friends, and they're like, you need to try at least to see if you like it or you can do it, and that's how everything started.
Okay, so what was the next step from there? Did you just start going to a bunch of like open mic nights for comedians and just kind of write your name on the list?
I tried to reach to like a famous comedian at the time that had a Netflix special. I think was from Australia. And I asked, how do I start comedy? I have no idea. What should I do? And she answered in a nice way that she's just said, just try open mic nights. And I was like, I'm going to try to search more into this term. I'm going to try to find what is this all about. And I was walking by like the city that I was living in. And I noticed a poster about comedy, so I just decided to reach to the promoter and say, I don't know how to start comedy, but is there any way that you can point me out where to start, or if I can start with you? And the guy just said, oh yeah, you can start in one of my nights. So that's how.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like it's always nice when someone's able to give you that start and give you quite literally a platform and a stage to kind of perform and get the practice in and the time. What was the first time stepping on stage like for you?
I didn't know exactly what to feel because I didn't expect it to go that well. The first, every comedian, I heard so many comedians podcasts and that sort of stuff, and they always say, oh, my first time was horrible. My first time was great. So I was like, I was not expecting to be great. I was like, I'm expecting to suck at this. And so that was great. I'm like, I don't know if this is good or not. So I just have that thought of, I don't know how to react. I got out of stage. There was a lot of emotions to process, and I tried to understand them.
What were you feeling at that time, and how did you kind of process everything?
I think I just didn't know what was all of those emotions of people reacting to what I said and enjoying what I said, to be honest. Because I was like, my goal when I went on that foot in that stage was like, don't freeze yourself in the stage. So people liking my stuff was not part of my goals for that night. I was just like, if you can say stuff and you don't freeze on stage, that's fine. So
yeah, okay, so you set your bar really low and then you ended up delivering really high, so good for you, that's awesome. Yeah. Preparing to go on the stage for the first time, did you just kind of sit in your room and write a couple of jokes, run through your material? Like, what was the prep for all of that like?
I was living with two of my best friends at the time, and I just decided to run the material with them, which made me less confident on my material. Because I couldn't deliver properly the stuff. And so when I went on stage, after that, I just called them and I said, oh, this went well. And I shared the video with them and they're like, I thought it would go worst. And I'm like, me too, don't worry. So all of that was kind of writing, and the script that I did, firstly, was one that now is in my second special called Clowny Life, that was about online dating and jobs and that sort of stuff. So, and the online dating part was supposed to be a sketch, a comedy sketch. That I didn't have the tools to do a comedy sketch the way that I wanted, so I adapted to stand-up.
I know when people think of like stand-up comedians, they think of like the specials that they see on Netflix or YouTube or wherever, or they've gone to a comedy club. They see like the performance. They see, the final polished delivered results. What was that process of writing the actual jokes, getting the verbiage and the timing down like? Like, how do you go and approach this?
It was just with time. I always say to new comedians that it's like, just go on stage, just try as much as you can, and if something doesn't work for the first time or the second time, just, if you believe on that, just keep trying. If it doesn't work for a lot of times that you try, maybe, or adjust, or just leave it for a while, but just don't take it out, or just don't throw it out if it doesn't work the first time, because every crowd is different. So it just needs stage time, and just change the format of the way you write the stuff or say the stuff.
Okay, so it's really trial and error, and you just kind of, like you said, each crowd is different, so the exact same joke can really land very well for this crowd, but not this one. You've done nothing different. It's just how the crowd...
Yeah. And I can give an example for who is interested in more the technical side of it. I was talking to you yesterday on by chat, and I had a gig in which I did material from my first special, because I want to try to go over a project that I can't disclose now, but it's going to be a big project for me. And I was running that material, and that material sucked on that night. And I know it worked. I did a full year of that. So sometimes, as I say, it's the crowd. It's the crowd that's not used to that type of humor, or just your delivery is just not great, even if it's an old joke. So it's just trial and error, as you said.
When you're talking to a crowd and you're kind of feeling out the room, will you change the material of your set on the fly to match the crowd in front of you? Or will you just try to do your material and see what lands?
I try to improvise a bit to get the crowd to know that I can understand what's happening, and then I go into my material. That normally works well.
Okay, so kind of improvise in the beginning, do a little bit of crowd work, and just kind of feel it out, because every crowd and every venue is unique, and then kind of go into your tried and true stuff.
To be honest, not crowd work. I don't do crowd work, but that's a nice example as well. I enjoy more watching the crowd and trying to come up with like an abstract concept of what's going around, because I don't enjoy interacting with the crowd. So I just come up with something like a joke about that specific place that I've been analyzing for the last couple of minutes. Just trying to come up with something.
Okay, just kind of warm everyone up a little bit, make it a little bit tailored to them and their experience and the venue, and then go right into your stuff. Gotcha. What do you do to find inspiration for your material? Do you draw on real-life examples? Do you draw on things that you've observed in the world?
Normally, it's just I go for a walk and stuff comes to me, or like I watch something bizarre happening in front of me, or I'm just like, oh, this bird did something that I want to write about it. Or, I don't know, it's just the walking part. It helps me clear my mind, but also sometimes give me ideas for comedy scripts.
Is there a place that you like to walk through? Is it by a beach, a park, through a mall, something?
Normally, if I can, is more mountains, is more like the hiking aspect. That's why like the vlogs I do is more regarding to hiking. But whenever I feel just like overcharged with stuff, anything serves the purpose for a walk. Even if it's just like a middle of a city, just walking, listening to my music, or just listening to the surroundings.
What do you usually do to kind of capture your jokes and your ideas? Do you have a little notebook that once you think of something, you're like, oh, wow, that's going to be fantastic. Let me write that down so I don't forget it for later. Or what's your process there?
I have like a notebook in my phone. So I just write like 3 or 4 words about what I saw. And then when I go back to that app, I was just like, oh, I remember this. I don't try to spend a lot of time because my purpose of going for a walk is just relax and not overthink. So it's just like, oh, I saw this, let me just write 2 or 3 words just to remember, and then I will try to write on a notepad or something, just something more structural for comedy.
Okay, so just the walk is to get that inspiration, to get those little nuggets of what could be a good joke or good material. And then you'll spend dedicated time later to, sit down, really play with the idea, refine it, write out the joke and stuff like that.
Especially because my type of comedy, and if people go search my YouTube channel, that probably will be in the description. It's a lot of fictional stuff. It's a lot of abstract concepts. So I take 1% of what I see and then I try to create the whole fictional story about it. So it takes time to what can I add to this? What can I add to this topic that I have? But let me create a full story with something, with the animal, with someone. Just trying. That process takes a while, and I just need to sit down and just try to write for a while without timing control. I think does it make sense? Without having the time, a specific time for stuff is just I can be here 30 minutes, but I can be 1 hour in just this joke trying to.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Do you have an example of an idea that you had to where you sit down and you wrote it out?
Yeah, and it's better to give an ideas that are already out because people can go see and have a clear mind on what I'm talking. There was a joke that I have in a bit. It's 2 minutes or 3 on YouTube. That is about the worst robbery ever. I think that's the title that I named the stuff. And it's just the premise happened from I go to the supermarket. I see this person robbing just sauces and getting caught, and I'm this is funny and weird. So, and then I was I need to create a whole fake scenario of me thinking on what would be if this guy wouldn't be caught, and the whole police stuff of the department fulfill the papers but what came from the original premise was just I saw this guy getting caught for sauces. This guy didn't try to steal anything else, was just sauces. And that for me was funny, that bizarre experience of just someone not stealing anything else, just ketchup or other.
Okay. How much, I think you've been fairly clear on it, but what's the balance of fictional elements that you create up in your mind versus real life lived experiences that you had? Does the lived experience mostly influence the fictional ones, or you just kind of run wild with that? What's the balance of reality and fiction?
It's just what I have a lot of stories that I want to try to bring to stand up, but because sometimes it's too personal, I can't write about them in a way that is funny. It's funny for people in my surroundings because they know me. But to transform that in a monologue that everywhere I go, people will understand, sometimes takes more time. And it's difficult than just, I see this bizarre situation, as I said, and it's just I'm just going to talk about this person. I think it's more easy for me to talk in the third person, maybe, than myself.
I can see that because, opening up about your personal lived experience, some people have been through some really tough shit but they can make jokes with it, whereas other people that's very hard for them to put themselves out in the world, especially to make it a routine and then go around town or cities or countries and just continue to say things about that because you become known for that. I can see that being really challenging, and I always wondered how comedians make peace with that and kind of exposing themselves out there like that. It's really interesting.
It depends on if there is a topic that's this is funny no matter, and I will shame myself for it, but this is funny, I will try, and there is certain things that I've been working on, but it's just there is I can give an example that I've been trying to work for several times. That is, I'm germophobic, and I also have fear of diseases, so that plus OCD, I have I think the whole catalog is almost catching the whole diseases. Instead of Pokemon, is gonna try to catch them all. So Yeah, I try to make sense of it, and I try to write something, but it feels so dark, the subject, that sometimes it's just like, is there a joke here, or is just me trying to express myself, and this is not really something? So I have that hard times with those sort of things.
Yeah, I could see that being challenging. I know for myself in the content creation space and some writers and musicians that I've talked to, you have your own voice, you have your own style, you have your own material that you like to cover. You have I don't know, you. And I know some people, they've gone really far to kind of cater to what they think people want as opposed to what they actually are and enjoy. What do you think is the balance of that for you? Because, you know, you have certain lived experiences and jokes that you like to tell, and then there are also jokes that do really well in the public. Where do you find that balance for yourself?
I I feel that I wanna distinguish myself from the rest, so I always try to bring topics that first and foremost caught my curiosity and also are not more of the same. For example, I can give an example to be easy for the listeners to understand. Like there is a lot of comedians talking about sex, online dating, and all of that range of topics. And I did that on the beginnings. That's why I put my second special was more on that. But if you go see all my content, it's not that. It's a lot of different topics that probably not a lot of people talk about it. But I just find interesting to read about or to search about, and I was just like, oh, I'm gonna talk about this certain topic and try to make it funny.
Do you have an example of those topics?
For example, suicide, that
Sure.
sort of like topics that are heavy. I'm aware that they are heavy, but also some people need to laugh about it. So I always try to talk about that. I always try to make jokes about schizophrenic people because you never know what they're going through. So it's just like, I don't think there is a boundary to a topic. So if I can make fun of it, if it's funny, if people laugh, that's what matters.
Yeah, I think the approach is super important. Like, you're right, these are dark and heavy topics. It's very easy to offend or off-put people. But how you approach it and frame it as in we're laughing together, not I'm laughing at you, I think that goes a really long way to, how the jokes can land. On that note, what do you think the role of comedy, specifically stand-up comedy and jokes, plays in society? Because like you touched upon, it can help people process some very heavy things that, maybe otherwise they wouldn't interact with.
I, since younger age as well, like I got through depression, I had hard times, and the only thing that was present for me, even when I was not doing comedy, was just watching comedy, either sketch, either just stand-up comedy, whatever it was, the shape and form. And I feel that there is a lot of people that need that space. That's why comedy events nowadays, more and more with social media, get sold out, because people need that space to break up with real life for a few hours. And then it's kind of having a break from everything. It's like, that is your real life. And it's like, I'm going to go to this space to laugh at stuff. And then tomorrow it's another day that I need to face. But that laugh, enjoying, not thinking about life helps people processing what's really happening and in a better way.
So, in a way, what do you do comedy for? Do you do it because you like standing on stage and, telling your jokes and sharing your story? Or do you like entertaining the crowd and seeing the smile and laugh on someone's face, or some combination of both?
I think it would be a combination of both, but more the last part, like just seeing people smile or seeing people come up to you after the gig and just saying, oh, you make my day the best from this. This was what I needed. And I just want to try to help people in a way that I know I can do it, and if people like what I do, that's great. I'm happy to help in that matter.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we touched upon this a little bit earlier, but what can some people who are just getting into stand-up comedy do to kind of get the ball rolling, to kind of get their feet wet and experiment in the space? You mentioned open mic nights, but what are some other ideas or examples?
I would say that is writing as much as you can, and then go test it out. Just go to open mics, just try to do as much as stage time as possible. Try to network with people that are doing the open mics with you, because you never know if there is a podcast that you might do. There is some project that you can do with other people. That's where like most of the contents come from. It's just like, oh, I perform with this person. Oh, this person is really nice. Suddenly this person is open like a comedy night. So I know this person. So it's all of that helps getting more stage time, helps getting contacts. And I think the whole business or the entertainment business industry is about networking. There is talent for sure, but networking is one of the most important aspects of it.
I found that in almost every single industry I've been in. I've worked in tech. I'm currently a professional photographer. I do this podcast. Networking and relationships are absolutely huge. So that's from the strategy side. What about like looking inward, getting over nerves and anxiety and fear? Being on stage, public speaking is a massive fear of most people. What's some advice to help people kind of overcome those hurdles?
For comedy, for example, as soon as the first joke lands, you know you are in a safe place. So you just need that safe place to perform, to be comfortable. But and this is cliche, is like what all the motivational speakers say, is like you need to get out of your comfort zone. And it's true, you need to get out there and try it. And you never know if you are capable of doing it if you don't try it, so.
No, that's absolutely true. I know that some things so let me take a step back. I used to perform music. I sang and played guitar, and I did that for several years. But in the beginning, like stage fright is real. You get nervous. It affects your performance, your ability to perform. And what I did mentally is I kind of put on a persona. So like, I'm not Jason in this moment. I'm someone who plays guitar and sings to a crowd and puts on a really good show. And you can do that, in the beginning, just to kind of set yourself apart so you are not nervous. You're playing a character who's doing this thing and they're very good at it. And eventually you blend the two together to where that becomes you. But having that mental separation was helpful for me in the very beginning. I guess the one piece of advice is I would make sure that doesn't develop into a crutch to where you're permanently separated. It's very important that they come together later, but it's helpful early on. Did you do anything similar?
Yes, when you mentioned that, I was like, yeah, I do the same. The character on stage if you saw like some of my content, it's just like it comes up, and I don't know if this is a correct word to say for American listeners, but in English we use a lot that is I sound like a cunt, like when I'm like a little bit arrogant and a little bit like a pricky bastard that knows everything. And that's like my comfort zone, is that character that just goes there and is like, I know everything. I don't care what you guys think. I will tell what I think. And that's like my character comfort zone. And when there was one point that I tried to do a show in which it was me and without that character. And I felt awful. I was like, I don't like this. I need to find the balance that it's me, but within this character, within this abstract, because just me, I can't do it. So yeah, that's a good advice.
It's fascinating seeing the two different characters, because I went to a stand-up show and, the crowd was interacting with a comedian. They did an hour set. It was fantastic, absolutely hilarious. But I was also doing photography for the night. So I got to hang out backstage in the green room, and we just got to hang out as people. And it's so different, the persona that they put on stage, the big performer, the confidence and the bravado, versus the person that they are behind the stage when the cameras are gone and they can relax and just kind of be, a normal person, more or less. But you can feel that difference when you interact with them, and it's fascinating.
And I know a lot of comedians, like my energy is low on stage. And outside, I'm trying to network with everyone. I'm trying to talk to everyone. But like, I know the opposites. I know people that are high energy on stage and then they get out of the stage and they are the opposite. They're like low energy. They're just like, I wanted to be left alone. I'm shy. I'm an introvert. So whatever helps, like doing the stuff that you want to do, that's the goal, I think.
Yeah. So why did you decide to be low energy on stage, but behind the scenes you get to be a little bit more high energy? Is that feeding into that character that you developed, or is this just how you naturally are when you perform?
It happened that like I had a couple of nights. I always like the beginning. I always tried to find my voice, even if it was sort of my voice was there, but wasn't this character. And there was one night that was just awful. I don't recommend anyone going through that. Helps as character building for comedy, and to like know that comedy is not just like higher stage, and sometimes you have shit gigs. But yeah, I had this shit gig, and I just went in this persona, just improvised, and like the comedians that there was the only ones watching, they enjoy too much of that, and they're like, you need to do more of this type of stuff. And I'm like, okay, let me analyze the footage, let me try to see what they are talking about. And I was like, oh, they like this person that is normally me, that doesn't give a shit, that doesn't care. And I was like, the best way to come up with this is just low energy, just like go annoyed with the world, trying to like, I don't want to be here, that kind of vibe.
Yeah.
And when I start implementing that character, I was like, oh, this works. So let's just continue this vibe, and let's continue doing my comedy this way.
Okay, so you've developed a style over the years that you've been doing this. You probably started out different, but over time you got positive reinforcement. You figured out the things that you liked and don't like. And then today you have this nice character, low energy, kind of standoffish, don't want to be here, very arrogant, but this works for you, and that's great.
Yeah. And also, I don't feel that I would be able to do like high energy type of comedy, because there is days that I'm not feeling myself, I'm not good mood, and even those days with the low energy characters, just like I just go there and sometimes it's even better. I'm just like, I'm truly annoyed at people today, so
yeah,
this goes well. And I feel if I had like a character that is like high energy, I probably would be tired even in those days. So I'm just like, I'm doing this, I don't want to be doing this, but I booked the gig, so let's do it, let's wrap this quick and let's go home and sleep and wait for the next day to be better. And like that high energy would get me exhausted and burn out maybe.
Okay, so you've settled on this style of performance because it's something that you can consistently deliver on. I think that's really, really important. What do you do when you're starting to lose a crowd? Like, you can feel the energy shift. What are some tools and techniques that you as a comedian can use to kind of bring them back in?
As any comedian, especially when you get more experience and you've done some professional gigs, you've been around for a while, you start having like some tricks in your sleeve. So I always have like a couple of them that I know everywhere I go, that because it's more of physical humor, and it's just like I have this low character on stage, and then like I start doing some physical humor, and then I get back to the low character. That works because it's unexpected. So that's always the type of stuff. Is just like, oh, this stuff is not working, so physical humor, and then back to that lower character energy.
So for people listening, can you explain what physical humor is, and then can you give an example of what you were doing?
I have been doing like a little bit or an in-betweens bit preparations or premises that is just like me watching my watch and just saying, oh, almost there. So that sort of stuff that I look at the watch, I look at the crowd, and I'm like, you'll need to wait for a little bit more. That sort of stuff, like, that is physical humor in sort of the sense, is not like high energy of like jumping on the stage, but is sort of like, okay, still a lot of time to go, so hold on. And that normally gets a laugh because people are not expecting someone just like, yeah, we'll need to go through this, I'm not gonna quit, I will do my time and I will do myself. So
that kind of reminds me of that Bill Burr bit when he was in Philadelphia and he had just completely lost the crowd. They were really angry with him and he just berated them for I think like 15 minutes, just screaming and yelling playfully back at them and just making fun of them relentlessly, just the entire set. And I don't know, as each minute passes, he's counting down the minutes until the set's over. It's hilarious. Are you familiar?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Speaking of Bill Burr, what are some of your influences? What are some comedians and comics that you listen to and enjoy?
I always have hard times memorizing names and remember names. I have one that I love too much, and I hope I get the name right, because if not, it's just fucked up. But Anthony Jeselnik is one of my favorites in America. There is one that I always forget the name. It's not my favorite, but it's like an influence by the way that he was original. That Jim Carrey did a movie about him that was like the Man in the Moon. I don't know if you know what.
Unfamiliar, but okay.
So it was just like an abstract comedian, just did like a bunch of weird stuff on stage, and that sort of things I really like because no one, if someone tries to do that, no one can do the same way that he did. So I enjoy that uniqueness. Outside of stand-up, I enjoy like Monty Python. That's just, for me, is just the best of the best. I would say like, I would go a little bit for Americans as more familiar than like probably British comedians. Let me try to think of a few examples. There is a nice British comedian that I will say that if everyone wants to go check him out, it's Ross Noble. It's a very abstract comedian. I love his style. And there is like a couple of others like Bill Burr, Bo Burnham. That's like I also get inspired by different things that they do. Especially Bo Burnham, because like the stage light, that sort of stuff I enjoy. A full show that is not just comedy. If I can, I will try to make like comedy with lights or something like props, trying to make the most of it. Outside of that, I would say I love watching and go to death metal concerts. So they always put a lovely show, and I get inspired by the way they attract crowds and they keep them listening to the songs and enjoying. So any band, I always find fascinating to just watch and just say, oh, they did this. Maybe I can adapt that to stand-up. Maybe I can try to bring that notion, that idea to stand-up.
Yeah. I always found that like being able to analyze things across disciplines, you can really find some useful techniques or ideas or inspiration. Do you have an example of taking something from the music world and applying it to comedy?
Maybe like that, like, oh, it's that time or something. Because you see like musicians like, oh, I'm gonna fulfill time with something. So this is just like before the music, and I'm like, oh, maybe I can fulfill time in a different way with something physical, with something. Plus the way that they entertain the crowd before the music is like, oh, okay, I can adapt that to comedy, even if comedians do that a lot, but I can adapt like having some bridges that are improvised to get to the bit.
You're right. So 2 parts to that. One, I've been to a lot of concerts. I do professional photography for them quite often. I never realized that, you're right, they're not playing music the entire time. There's downtime in between songs. Someone needs to swap out a guitar, they need to change their rig, whatever. But in that time, they're usually interacting with the crowd. They're usually doing something improvisational. They're trying to be funny. So there are little bits from there that you can glean to then apply it to comedy. But then also from like the music aspect, those little improvisational bits that you can do before landing at a chorus or landing at the big part of a song. Like those ideas as an abstract can definitely apply over. I didn't think of that before. That's cool.
And for sure there is one aspect that if I had a big platform to do like a theater or something, I would try to draw attention to it. That is just like the cinematic aspect, like having a nice background. Because that, I don't know if you're familiar with a band that is death metal, but like more metal, that is like Dragon Force. They're...
Yeah, fantasy metal. Yeah, they're fantastic.
I went to see them in London a few months ago, and I just loved how they put the show with just so much stuff in the stage. And I'm like, this is worth the ticket. I always enjoy that if someone pays a ticket to go see me, that they come in the end out of the gig and they're like, oh, this was worthy the ticket. This could be way expensive for the stuff that it does. This could be way expensive, but it's way worth it. So I always enjoy leaving the audience and the fans wanting more, but also realizing that's like, oh, that was a good show, was worth the money. Because sometimes you go to shows, even stand-up comedy, and you feel that you overpaid for an artist, and you don't want that feeling. You don't want the feeling that you go see something and you are overpaying to see.
Yeah, you want people to walk away feeling good about what they just did. They want to be entertained. They want to feel like they got their value out of it. Their time was well spent. That's really, really important. What's the comedy industry like? I actually have no idea about any of this. Like, how do bookings work? How do you find shows and venues? How is the ticket and sales split between the house and the comedian? I don't know how any of this works.
The bookings, especially in the more amateur, semi-professional manner, is just you reach out to venues and you just try to play for them, especially when there is a lot of comedies already around, and that's why I moved near London, because it's easy to reach to this comedy gig that is already going and already have a crowd going there in weekly basis. Or like I'm doing at the moment, it is just like I reach out to venues, I send a message, I try to structure well. I have asked opinion for like 2 promoters that I know and I've worked on the last couple of years, and I just ask, I want to send a message, this is how I structure, how do I send it, do I change, do I modify my grammar? And they help me structure the stuff. I send it. I got so far a reply back that is positive. I'm doing one this month when we are recording, that is in August. Hopefully all goes right and I keep going with that night. I also have a venue that reply to in recent days that is interested in central London. So I just message a bunch of venues, gigs, and try to see if anything replies back. And it's sort of a trial and error as well. It's just, I'm going to send 100 message, maybe I get back in a positive way, maybe 2. But it's that's the way the business is done. And the only thing that we can do as comedians or promoters is just trying to create your own things and not waiting for someone to give you a spot or stage time.
I mean, 2% is not bad. Like, I think people vastly overestimate how responsive people are. So when I send out cold emails or calls about my photography services, if 2 people get back to me out of 100, I feel fantastic. But yeah, I know what you mean. When you reach out to these people, are you including like a portfolio, like a tight 5-minute reel of the things that you're doing? Like, what do you include in this message?
I include a message on the sort of, especially on Instagram, I work with, and that's the way I reach to you as well. I just message you, I saw your project and I found it interesting and I decided to send you a message. I normally just, because Instagram, the way that it works is just like a very tight message. It's not a long message. So I just try to compile like my achievements, what they ask normally, like, oh, what you've done. And normally in the end of it, I just say like all my work can be seen on my YouTube, because that way they can direct it. And if they want something specific, I already have the links. It's just a question of sending to them. I already know that some promoters, for example, ask for, if I'm doing a 10-minute spot that is paid, they asking for a 10 or 15, whatever it is, the time. So I already have that set up and ready to go if they ask for it.
What are the common formats for comedians and, time slots? Is it 5 minutes, 10, 15, 20, half an hour?
For amateur comedians, all starts by 5. Then slowly you go to 7 or 10, depending on the places. Like London is a lot of 7s. I start to realize that. 10s is more like for professionals, but I've done 10s and 15s all around the UK or even abroad. It depends on how they structure the night. But normally, like 10, 15s it's sort of a semi-professional. You cannot make a living out of it. You can translate it to like US dollars. I would say that if you do 15 minutes pay, maximum you can get is like $50 It's that
Okay.
that's not much. If you
It's not great,
even if
but yeah.
you do a bunch of gigs, it's just like, it's nice to help with the groceries, but that's about
Yeah.
it. So the paid gigs normally go from like 20 and 30s. That is like opening act and closer act. And that
Mhm.
normally the range is around 200 per gig. For like,
Okay.
so that's
Yeah.
where the money lays down. And that's
Yeah.
where like most comedians want to try to have like a solid 20 or solid 30 to like just apply for that and start to make a reasonable living.
That makes sense. When you structure your jokes for a 5-minute set versus a 7-minute set, they're pretty close in time, so you can just kind of throw in a couple of little extra things but keep it mostly the same. But I imagine it gets really different when you hit 15 minutes and 20 minutes. Like the pacing and the flow needs to completely change to kind of fit this larger block of time.
And
Right.
I always say to new comedians that it's easy to write a 5 minutes, even if it's just like the jokes and the topics are all different. 7's okay, still not hard, but it's achievable. Then you need to start having some structure, and you need to make that the audience wants to listen to you during that whole time. When you go to a 15 and 20, that requires that like the topics are not very diverse, that is around the same topic, and there is not, because if you're and I always said that to new comedians, because sometimes I'm trying to mentor them or coach them in the right way, or trying to help them to get some spots, and I always say that's like the best way to get a nice 20 minutes or 15 is just having around 2 or 3 topics maximum, like not going too diverse on it, because if you do, there is comedians that do well and there's like one-liners, that's fine, but if it's like too diverse, you're gonna end up losing the crowd at certain point. So
Yeah.
you want to grab their attention all the time, maybe write a long joke, a long story that they are with you all that time, because that's what they are for there. Like, they are there to enjoy your comedy. They want to root for you, but if you make it like so diverse, they will lose the track of what you're talking and will be confused. So that's my best advice at how more or less the system works.
Yeah. I think that's really important because having central topics and themes, it makes it really easy for people to latch onto to understand. You can do callbacks to earlier things that you mentioned in the set, and it fits cohesively. So that structure is really, really important. And I think that's something that a lot of, I don't know, I'll call myself a common person, overlook when going to see a, stand-up event. I just look at it and I laugh and I'm just there to be entertained, but I don't really take that step to understand how this actually works.
And also for comedians, like for people that are starting, it's easier to remember if it's just like around the same topics. Because I had difficult times remembering one-liners that is just like, oh, now I'm talking about bathrooms, now I'm talking about bananas, now I'm talking about soup. And it's just like so diverse that it's easy to make a bridge to it. And I'm like, I don't know how to remember all of this. And when you do just one topic or a topic that you can add to different topics, but it's like you can make a bridge easily, it's easier to remember because it's like, oh, I'm going to talk about this, and then from this, I do the bridge to this because it leads to that. For example, and this is a set that I'm working on. There is a topic that I'm talking about walking and going for a walk and that sort of stuff. And then I lead back to that old joke of the grocery stores, like seeing that robbery, because it's easy to connect the dots of, oh, I was walking, and since I was walking, I stopped by a grocery store.
Yeah.
So that makes it easy for the crowd to understand, oh, okay, this is a continuous story, even if the jokes are separate, but this is a continuous story.
Right. Those transitions are really important. You're right. Because I've seen some comedians, they just hard jump from one topic to the next. One breath is one topic, one breath is the next, with nothing connecting it. But what you're describing is transitions in between topics so that people can follow the journey between it and it all feels cohesive.
Because and I forgot to mention, one of my favorite comedians, for example, in that style, that genre, is like Gabriel Iglesias, the Fluffy. And
Oh,
like,
yeah.
and you can see that he's like, he has a lot of different stories, but like he tries to make a connection because the crowd wants to like follow a story, a route. That's like for me, it's just like, oh, okay, I can make that with my style as well. I can make something in those terms, sort of.
Speaking of stories and styles, how important do you think it is for a comedian in today's age to have a social media presence and a body of work that people, booking agents, can see online?
And nowadays, more and more, I think it's important. But I wish I said no, it's not, because sometimes I hate the work of doing social media. Because it's a lot of work, especially with the clips. I don't enjoy putting out like short content. I enjoy working on a long format type of style. And when I'm like, oh, I need to work on this, I need to put like those subtitles and make it interesting, I hate it. I hate it. And I wish it was back in the days, and I know a couple of comedians, friends of mine. One of them is my mentor. It helped me a lot. That he said back then was just like, I started, there was not a lot of comedians and I just had paid gigs. And I'm like, great, I wish I had that level. That I
yeah,
could
must
put,
be nice.
Yeah, I could put like content on YouTube, like my vlogging or whatever, but not worrying about the views. Just like, oh, I have work, so it's fine.
What do you think is the balance between putting your content online for everyone to see and keeping some in reserve so you have some new, fresh content to deliver when you're actually on stage?
I'm gonna say something that is like contradictory to like what normally vlogging is, that is like exposing most of my life. But I always try to keep certain parts, even not just for comedy, just like private parts, like friends, family, just like outside of it. It's just like, okay, I choose this, that's nice. But if I'm hanging out with you, unless it's like, it's content creators, I'm like, oh, let's create a collab and also at the same time hanging out. But most of my friends are not in this realm. They don't want to be, they like having their privacy. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm not showcasing. Yeah. And I have so much weird and hilarious shit that if I shared, if they would be fine with it, I'm like, that would be viral. But I'm like, oh yeah, it's privacy. We have a good time. I keep those moments in my phone or my computer just for me and to laugh sometimes. But it's important to have some moments for yourself. Some moments just like, oh, I'm not going to talk about this maybe in vlogging and say for stage because this is way funnier to just be in this. Just try to have that balance between those three, or just to do whatever you do.
The privacy thing that you mentioned is absolutely huge. That's something that's consistent advice that I've been given from almost everyone I talk to now that I've stepped into the content creation space. Once you give away your privacy, you are never getting that back. So have those guards in place. Like, not everything about your life has to be, open to the public for people to go and see. It's okay to keep some things back because, some things are private. Yeah.
And sometimes there is the urge to like just, oh, I need content, let's record this. I had a recent idea of like just go with my GoPro and record my walkings around here where I'm living. And I'm like, no, let's just leave this for private, for myself. I don't want to showcase, because there is not a lot, first of all. It's just like buildings, and there is occasionally one park here and there. But it's just like, let's just leave these places for myself to enjoy.
Yeah.
They are nice. You don't see a lot of people in a normal day basis. It's a nice place to live by. Let's just leave it like that. Let's just keep it that way, because I don't want to expose too much of where I'm living. And if certain projects that I talk to you happen and go well, I'm like, yeah, I want to still have my privacy within the places that I live, not to...
I mean, there's also like a security aspect. There's a content creator that I was watching. She was, she gives business advice, but for one of the videos that she did, she went on a walk, she went with a camera person, and she was just spouting business advice as they're walking around their neighborhood. And someone, a kind person, they messaged them privately and like, hey, when you were walking in this route, we can see all of the street signs, we can see all of the buildings, we see all of the businesses over there. Like, you should probably blur that out. There's a legitimate security concern for you if some weirdo from the internet wants to find you. So yeah, there's always that aspect to it as well. You gotta be safe online.
And also most of my content like vlogging is just like, oh, I go to this place, I'm not living there. So it's fine. It's fine to showcase, it's fine. Even I did some content in Portsmouth. That was the city that I was living in the south of the UK. But most of the content was like the south of Portsmouth was not exactly where I lived. I lived the part that I lived just for myself. I was just like, yeah, even on some parts that I showed the walk, I was just like, I'm gonna cut until here. Because here you cannot understand exactly where I live. Because if you're like, oh, is that building? No, it's not. My building is 4 miles away from this. So it's just like having that notion of reality and safeguarding yourself.
Yeah, if you're in a public enough space, a major enough city, then it's fine. Like if you're walking in Central Park in New York City, it doesn't matter. It's completely fine. Speaking of, businesses and locations and all the other stuff, as you've gone on your comedy tours, have you noticed different reactions from the crowds in different regions? Because you mentioned you did a tour in Portugal. You mentioned you've, done comedy in London. What are the cultural differences between these places?
Even within the UK, I've done comedy all around whatever I could. And there is like difference between Cambridge, that is a little bit more north than London, to London. There is difference from Portsmouth to London. Outside as well, like abroad, there is difference like in the way that people understand the jokes, in the way that, for example, as I think I said before, like I used to, and I still do in some jokes, like do wordplay, because English has a lot of wordplaying. And it's just like, in Portugal, for example, that doesn't work because English is a second language for most of them. What they know about the language is just like, oh, this word means this word, so it's just this word. So having that word play, they're like, I don't understand. I don't know how this is funny.
Yeah.
So it always an adaptation, and I think comedians need that instead of just like, oh, I'm just in London, I'm just performing in London. I think you need to get outside, even in New York, Los Angeles. You need to get outside and perform in other places to understand what works everywhere and what just works on like your normal place, the place you live.
I think that's a really good detail. Yeah, because, I don't know, I'm making up numbers, but like 70% of your set, be locked in because it's tried and true. You've tried it everywhere. It works really well. And then just leave a little bit of room for adjustment to tailor to that specific crowd. Because, like you said, in Portugal, the wordplay doesn't land. English is a second language. They don't understand the nuance. But in London, English is the primary language. It can land really well. That's really important. Yeah. So a closing tradition that we have on the show is the previous guest leaves a question for the current guest, not knowing who the current guest is. And the question left for you is, what was one of the most rewarding experiences in your creative journey so far?
I would say even if it was not the best gig I ever done, just performing in my hometown. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see that like this is the clue from my hometown. This shirt is from my amateur hometown club, in which is the only team that I'm truly proud of being a fan and played for years, been a manager of football for years as well. So I've spent a lot of time there as a player, as a fan, and playing a gig for my hometown was rewarding by the fact that I had people that knew me my entire life coming to see the gig. They didn't know that I did comedy, so they're just like curious to see. I had family, and for example, in England, I perform. I don't have, apart from some friends that I made on the journey that I've been, I don't have anyone here. So going back to Portugal and doing that and have family and have all the people that I grew up with, that was rewarding.
Yeah, that must be huge. I mean, all of the support that you've had, people that you're close with and appreciate having in your life, get to see the thing that you've done. That must feel amazing to kind of have that exposure and that ability to share with your loved ones. That sounds great. Where can people find you, and where would you like to draw people's attention to?
I would say it's in my YouTube channel. That's the main source of content. All the links for all the social medias can be seen through my YouTube. So, Stia
Sure.
Productions, easy to find, plenty of content. Trying to bring more stand-up to it, but mostly it's just vlogging, trying to talk about experience, trying to go to places, try to showcase nice places that you guys can visit and at your own time. So yeah, a little bit of all of it, stand-up and vlogging. That's it.
Yeah, a fun mix. I will put all of those links in the show notes below so that people can find you. Stia, this has been fantastic. I've had a lovely time. I've learned a lot about the world of, stand-up comedy and the life that you lead. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you for having me. I truly enjoy and I hope the listeners enjoy it too.
Absolutely. Cheers.